I used to really enjoy going to movies in movie theaters. I just loved the whole atmosphere, going to see a new movie with a bunch of other people and being in the theater. And I don't know, in fact, when we lived in Chicago, I joined a movie theater club where you paid a certain amount of money every month and then you could see whatever movies you wanted to see. It was like I watched that many movies, it made sense financially for me to do that. But over time, I started to enjoy it less and less. When we moved here, I just wasn't going. I don't know if I got old or if the movies started to not be very good or whatever. But for whatever reason, I wasn't going as much. And then, of course, COVID happened, and movies, theaters, a lot of them, they were closed down. And I hardly ever go to movies in theaters anymore. I look at these and I go, that would be 3 hours of my life I would never get back. I don't know that makes any sense. This just looks stupid, whatever. Well, one day my son, Jonathan, said, you got to come let's go to this movie, and it's Dune. And it's like 4 hours long or whatever, 3-4 hours long. And are you sure? Really? I don't know this. I don't know. I was not excited about it, but I wanted more or less to be with him more than actually to see the movie, right? So okay, I'll go. And I loved it. It was a really good movie. So I am not intending to be an evangelist for this particular movie, but just to say there was this experience where I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. Has that ever happened to you, right? Where someone drags you to something and you're like, I don't want to do this, but then you really like it. Or maybe someone wants to give you some sort of food, some dish, and you're like, really? That just looks horrible, but you actually taste it and it's really good. Sometimes our expectations things are better than we expect. So this movie experience reminded me of two things. I learned two things that day. I learned that when you love something, you want to share it. My son really wanted me to go to that movie. He wanted to tell other people about it because he liked it. And that's what we do, right? And then the other thing I learned is that if you're open, you might just find that the thing you didn't think was going to be that cool actually turns out to be pretty cool. Well, that's going to get us to our text today. And in this text, we discover, or we hear about these people who become kind of important disciples of Jesus. They become part of the 12. Their initial encounters with Jesus. Now, I got to tell you, when I was putting this message together, I had a way of talking about this, and the point was, when people see Jesus, then they want to follow him. When people see Jesus, they want to tell others about him, and it kind of is this assumption. And then at some point during the week, I just sort of stepped back and remembered that it's not always the case, right? So, in fact, let's think about this. What we learn from the gospel, and by the way, there is an outline in the bulletin. You can take notes if you'd like. What we learn in this gospel, and we need to keep it in mind when we read this particular text. What we learn is that not everybody who listens to Jesus became a fan. Not every listener becomes a fan. And not every fan becomes a follower. So these disciples, when they spend time with Jesus, they are blown away, and they very quickly realize that he is who he said he was, that he is the Messiah, and they want to follow him. But again, remember, the gospel starts with this teaching, this reminder that Jesus came into the world that he created, and yet many of the people did not receive him. And you're going to see this theme throughout the book, there's a lot of conversation in the Gospel of John where Jesus is talking to the religious leaders and talking to groups of people who don't believe him, who are opposing him, right? So what we're going to say is, instead of just saying when everybody sees Jesus, when people see Jesus, they want to follow him, we're going to say when open people see him. And so that's that issue. We want to be, and we invite other people to be. We hope and pray that other people will be, and we want to be ourselves open. And by open, what that means is you are seeking truth, and at the same time you're not like committed. You're open to the fact that whatever opinions you might have might be wrong, right? So, there are people who, and maybe some people in your family, that grew up in church and for whatever reason turned their back on it. They had a bad experience, whatever. Certain things come into their lives and it leads them to a place of disillusionment and doubt. And so now when at that point in their lives, when they hear the gospel, they have negative views about it. And what I will say to people is, sometimes I just want to encourage you to doubt your doubts. Are you sure that this is not real? Are you sure that, the Christian people are just messed up? Maybe you had a certain experience, but Jesus and the gospel is bigger than that. The religious leaders who heard Jesus were threatened by him. They had their views in stone about how they understood the Old Testament, what they expected the Messiah to be, and Jesus was not that, and rather than be open to that, they just opposed it. So, open people, all right? So when open people encounter Jesus, this is what we learn from these verses, all right? So when open people spend time with Jesus, they want to follow him. And, it's challenging for me and important for me, I think, to keep this in mind, and I want to invite you as well, that it can be challenging for you, challenging for all of us, and important for us to keep in mind that when people encounter Jesus and when God works in people's lives, it's not always the way we expect. If you think about it, when Jesus came into the world, who were the people who opposed him? It wasn't the irreligious people. It wasn't the spiritual seekers. It was the super religious people who already had their minds made up about exactly how everything should be. And Jesus challenged that. And sometimes I think even for us as Christians today, sometimes Jesus will challenge us that we're not always as correct and right about things as we think we are. So when we have this openness and we encounter Jesus, people are blown away. It says when John was there with the disciples, they see Jesus, and these disciples heard him, and they're like, okay, hey, Jesus. And Jesus says, what do you want? And they said, where are you staying? And he goes, well, come, hang out with me. So they spend the day. And after spending that day, you saw what happened? Andrew, first of all, he realizes Jesus is who he says he is. And so then he's going to tell his brother about it. And then later, there's Nathaniel, who's initially hesitant, but he spends time with Jesus, and he gets it. He's like, okay, this person is the Messiah. So if we can just keep at it, if we can just keep seeking, if we can keep encountering the Bible texts, if we can keep exposing ourselves to Christian teaching, we just might discover something about Jesus. And so when people who are open spend time with Jesus, They were blown away by him. And that's it's so powerful. Yeah, I said this earlier. Andrew says, we have found the Messiah. Nathaniel says, you are the Son of God. All right, let's move on. When open people get to know Jesus, this is the second part of it, they want to tell other people. Like, the first thing that they do is they're like, who can I tell about this? Right? So the first thing that Andrew did after he spent that night with Jesus, or spent that day listening to Jesus, he's like, okay, this is the Messiah. I've got to tell Peter. So he brings Peter, and Jesus, says, Simon, you will be called Cephas, which means Peter. Okay, so then they encounter Philip. He says, follow me. Philip found Nathaniel, and Nathaniel is initially hesitant. We're going to come back to that. But Nathaniel, Jesus says, well, come follow me and come and see, right? So this is what happens. This is what we do. And look, we do this with all kinds of things. When people find a restaurant that they like, what do? They take pictures of their food and put it on Facebook or Instagram and tell people what a great restaurant this is, right? We are all evangelists. Whether it's about church or not, we are evangelists about something. When we find something that we are impressed with, we just want to tell other people about it. So we do this all the time. This is normal. This is natural. And in a sense, it's if we have something that is life-changing and life-altering, but we're not talking about it, that's weird. There's a problem. There's a concern about that. And maybe one of the issues with this is how we think about evangelism. And maybe it might be more helpful to think about being a witness. So I like to put it this way. Jesus calls us to be witnesses. And we are hesitant to do that because we think we need to be the defense attorney. Right? Think about this. A witness, all the witness has to do is testify to what they have seen and heard. Just be honest. Just tell people what you've experienced. That's all. We are all called to do that. Some of us have the gift and calling to be evangelists, and that is people who are going to explain things in more detail, people who are going to give answers to the questions and the maybe the doubts or the concerns that people have. There are people who have that job to kind of like be the defense attorney and explain it and make a case. Don't worry that you have to do that with everybody. You can at least just tell your story. So you might remember Bernie Drews here in our midst. He is someone who has the gift of evangelism, and he wants to help other people strengthen their gifts in doing this. And so again, if you would like to learn more about that, if you'd like to get some training and talk with people about how you can be a better witness, let me know or let Bernie know. And I don't know exactly when he's going to start that, but that's going to be soon. How can we talk about our faith in a way that doesn't alienate people, but in a way that's honest and has integrity? That's what we're called to do. Okay, then third, when people spend time with Jesus, when open people spend time with Jesus, they will often be challenged to move beyond their superficial assumptions. So this gives one example of that. Nathaniel, when he hears about Jesus, and he hears that Philip says that this Jesus, he is the Messiah. He is the one sent from God. And this guy is from Nazareth, and Nathaniel has this idea that the Messiah needs to come from Bethlehem, not from Nazareth. So it's like that town, Nazareth, nothing, what good can come from there? That's like Cambridge or something. No, I'm just kidding. I can say that I don't think anybody here is from Cambridge, so I think I'm safe. But you know what I mean? He had this picture that the Messiah would come from a certain place. Didn't really know that Jesus was actually born in Bethlehem. But anyway, because of these assumptions he had, he's like, this doesn't make any sense. But he explored it, and the more he got to know Jesus, the more he got to see Jesus and hear his teaching, changed his perspective. So we're going to celebrate communion today, so I'm making the message a little bit shorter. So I'm going to close with these questions, all right? So there are two different questions for two different kinds of people. So the first might be some of us who are here today. Maybe someone watching the video, and you have maybe a kind of cynical view of what church is about, what we talk about when we talk about the gospel, we talk about Jesus and who he is. You're not sure what you think. And maybe it might be worth thinking, do I have certain assumptions that I should hold up to examine? Even those of us who are Christians, I think sometimes we get certain assumptions based on maybe what we grew up with, what we heard. Maybe we heard it from a church or some other teacher, and it actually is not true, but we think it's true. We associate that with what Christianity is, and that assumption needs to be challenged. So what superficial assumptions do I need to look at again? I'll just hold that out there. Maybe if something comes to your mind, just think about that. Did you have something you wanted to say, Mark? Oh, yes. Thank you. Mark pointed out to me that I forgot to do the installation of elders, the new elder and deacon. I think we have to do that next week because I don't have the form. And I'm not here next week. We're going to do that the 19th. Yeah, I know. They can meet. Where was I? Okay. Who can I tell? That's the question for most of us, right? Who can I tell? So we've talked about this before, and I want to hold it out for you again. Is the question, who are the people in my life that I could reach out to, that I could share the love of Christ with? And so does anyone come to mind right now? Are there neighbors, friends, people you work with? And I would just invite you to pray for them. And in fact, let's do that right now. And just begin praying that God would give you an open door and a way to talk to them, an occasion to talk to them, and allow yourself to just be a witness.